So I wanted to touch again on a topic that probably we'll be talking about for the next couple of days, which is really this topic of patience and how to have more patience, both in work and in life. And so, one of the things that sort of came up as I was again doing some research and looking at other posts and looking at other people and what they had to say was this idea of what is causing you to have this impatient behavior. And I think, as I had mentioned before, people cutting me off when I'm driving tends to be definitely a big one for me. But the point on that one is it's literally the cause, right? The cause of me being impatient is a situation or a circumstance. So what I found interesting, though, when I was looking at this, was that one of the causes that don't cause me to be as impatient is usually related to either my kids, other people's kids, or just people in general. And sometimes the way to become more patient is sort of to have some awareness and figure out what it is that causes you to be the least patient. So, in my particular case, I had an example of where I tend to be more patient with my children. So, as many of you know, I have a daughter who is on the autism spectrum. And so she has this thing that she does when she's distressed, right? So, if her iPad stops working, or the dog looks at her funny, or one of the videos says that shh, which is like a dirty word in our house. Apparently, that's very painful to her. She will just start screaming like crazy, like just ah, ah, right, like it's like a siren sound. And I'll tell you, the number one worst possible thing that I can do in that situation is go in there and go, "Stop yelling! What are you yelling about?" Or being impatient in general will literally just escalate the situation into a place that's not good at all. But if I stop and pay attention for a moment and sort of figure out what's causing her, right, to be impatient, it can actually help me. So very often, like what it turns out to be is when people do something that annoys you or they're loud or obnoxious, there's also a cause behind that. And for her, it's very, like I said, very often a YouTube video made her sad, and like 2 seconds of letting her know it's okay can really de-escalate it. And so I would welcome all of us to sort of consider that same thing, the awareness of what's causing you to be impatient. And then really, is there anything that you can do about that thing? If there isn't, that's one thing, but what if there is, right? So for me, if it's a person there, or there's a behavior that that person's exhibiting, very often the behavior is a form of communication. So I can try to be more aware what might be causing them distress, or open up the lines of communication with them. And very often, and maybe that's why it's easier for me in like sort of the person scenario, I can be a bit more patient. Now, on the flip side, the big challenge that I have is when it's sort of circumstantial and I'm impatient, right? If I'm standing in line at the grocery store and there's really not much that I can do about that. And that's when, like, our last conversation about sort of finding distractions or doing some other things can really help. With all of that being said, there actually are a couple other things that we can consider about patience when we're kind of talking about sort of being patient in the face of adversity. One of those, like we just talked about, was what's the cause of your impatient behavior, and is that if it's a person, how can you behave and or communicate differently? But what if it's something else, right? What if it's a circumstance? Now this one cracks me up, but like one option is to just relax, man, right? Chill out. Or just relax cat. You ever see like those cat pictures where the cats are all like one of their legs is hanging off and their head sideways? They're not stressed, right? They're not annoyed. They're not in alert. They're literally just chilling out. So if there is a circumstance that's really just working you up, sometimes the answer is to just try to relax, or to, if you're not a meditator, fine, but maybe it is taking a deep breath. Maybe it is trying to clear your thoughts or think of a positive thought. Again, the idea of maybe a cat video, funny cat video. There's one right now on TikTok that cracks me up. It's this cat that goes to take a bite of broccoli and he starts like a cat gag. It's the funniest thing ever. So like literally just kind of will help me feel a little bit better if there's nothing I could do. Now of course if you're driving and You're frustrated at someone, please don't search up cat videos in your car. But maybe that's more of a deep breath type of thing. But another way that you can look at this is sort of thinking about what's really important to you, like focus on something that's important. I have a good one here. I remember getting cut off, which is always a hot one I'm going to bring up. But I got cut off I actually cut someone off accidentally because someone slammed on their brakes in front of me and the traffic was really tight. So I just sort of moved over quickly and didn't really realize that there was someone like driving like a bat out of heck coming on the other lane. And so essentially I cut that guy off, right? He was in a very large pickup and he was going really fast, and the fact that he had to slow down um, ruined his day. And I waved and I was like, I'm sorry, because it was clearly my fault, and I'm not a big fan of cutting folks off. This guy like freaked out, right? He's like hanging out of his car, he's screaming obscenities at me. He's like, I'm gonna kick your blah blah blah, you B word. Like the guy is just losing his bananas. And as he was behaving like that and hanging out his car door and all of this stuff, he drove his truck into a telephone pole, and no joke at all. And I will admit, sadly, on my part, my at first I was like, "Well, that's what you get," but then I really felt bad because the guy probably got hurt. He definitely smashed up the front of his truck. And the thought is like, is getting cut off in traffic really worth losing your mind over and potentially, getting hurt badly, smashing up your only vehicle that you can use to transport your family around? And for me, like my big picture is I have four small humans at home and two four-legged humans. And if I get hurt because I'm behaving badly because I'm annoyed or someone has caused me to be impatient, or if I start screaming like a crazy banshee and somebody decides to, respond to that in kind, I may not come home to my kids okay, or maybe not come home at all. And is that impatient act that we had really necessary, right? Really, is it something that's going to really help as we move forward? And I do think some people are a little better about one thing versus another, right? Sometimes people can be much more patient if it's a situational thing because they go, "Oh, I know it's nothing I can do about it." Others might be a little easier to be patient around people. But at the end of the day, if either of those are still a challenge for you, I would invite you to think, well, what might be more important right now than being right? Or what might be more important than getting to work on time? Um, if you're like going fast and cutting people off, maybe that's not the best way to go. However, like maybe and that's why they're cutting you off. Maybe that their last chance. If they don't get to work on time, they get fired, right? So there's always a reason behind the behavior. And if I left everyone with nothing other than that, then I would invite you to consider that all behavior, good or bad, is just a nonverbal form of communication. And if that's what you're thinking, is there a different way that you might want to respond? All right, guys, thanks so much for joining me today. Look for other videos coming up on topics that will help you live your best life. I'll see you soon. Have a good